Okay, we are going to get started. We know that people are still tracking in. So once again, if you are looking for the session, The Human Right to an Inclusive Education, you are in the right place, and welcome.
Hi everyone. My name is Emily and I use she, her pronouns. I will talk about my story as someone who has been segregated in school and how living an inclusive life has eventually positively impacted me. I have had many personal experiences that I will share with you today. Please feel free to ask any questions and I can answer them after the speech is over.
Okay, and I'll introduce myself and Alexi, who is here with us. So my name is Aqeela Khalid. I am an inclusive education consultant for Inclusion Alberta. I'm here to support Emily a little bit. And we also have Alexi Tweedy. They are sitting off camera, but they are also here to support us. And yeah, we are joining you from Treaty 6 Métis Lands at Edmonton, Alberta. Right here before we get to the story.
Before we get to the story, I would like to share more about myself. I am 30 years old. I married in August and live in Edmonton with my husband and our cat. I attend school at MacEwan University, taking the social work diploma program with the support of Inclusive Post-Secondary here in Edmonton. I graduate this school year. I am a self-advocate for inclusion and I'm very excited to use my social work skills learned in my everyday life as well as in my future career. I also want to work with families in the foster care system because of my own experiences in that system. This is still my passion and I also hope to use my role as a self-advocate to help families and children with advocacy for inclusion. Fun facts. I love cats. Our cat's name is Precious, and we got her about 7 months ago. She is 3 years old. I love to sing and play guitar. I also lived in Penticton until I was 10.
Okay, so I'm going to talk just a little bit about um, inclusive education and the Convention for the Rights of the Child. So in 2008, the Convention for the Rights of the Child was enacted. And so this reflects the change of perception with people with disabilities and certainly intellectual disabilities over time. From at one point it being on the books in law that students were uneducable to now where at times students with intellectual disabilities are competing in academics. So this convention contains in Article 24 an explicit reference to the concept of inclusive education. And so it details how this method of delivery of education is rooted in best practices. And there's overall beneficial outcomes actually for everyone, including those with disabilities. And so this is part of a wider strategy that we kind of joke it's literally about world peace because it is about creating a world where there is peace, tolerance, sustainable use of resources and social justice, and where the basic needs and rights of all are met. I promise I won't go on long about this, but just a couple notes. So they do, in the convention, actually define inclusion, segregation. They give specific definitions. And so just FYI, in Alberta, there's certainly much work to be done in terms of bringing our provincial policy to align with what's listed or detailed in this convention. And that another sort of key note about this is just that this highlights inclusive education as a fundamental right? So as Emily shares her story throughout the day, you'll notice that her story and the things that she shares do not actually match with what this convention says, and that many of her experiences would not go under the category of what is inclusion. So very quickly again, sorry, just the specific definitions, it's helpful to know that segregation is refers to those separate environments. And I just want you to think about, as Emily shares her story, which of her settings would fall under this category. And this is an isolation of students without disabilities. And that inclusion is more than just a setting, it's a process embodying changes, but it does specifically say, with a common vision that serves to include all students of the relevant age range. And so it's just things to think about as you listen to Emily share her story.
My story. I have always been a determined person. When people say that I could not do something, I would show them that I can by never giving up. My younger self was persistent. I wasn't always given the opportunity, but I kept fighting. I was placed in segregated classes in school, but I was able to ease out by advocating for what I needed. Throughout my schooling, I had to fight to get higher education. In my earliest memory, I remember being in preschool and the teacher told my mom she thinks I should be tested for disability. I remember I only wanted to do crafts and did not want to socialize. I always preferred doing my own thing. When I was in kindergarten, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and I was out of school for about 2 weeks. In kindergarten, I liked to play and do my own thing. I remember the teacher told my mom that I could not spell my name yet. However, the teacher was very patient with me and kept teaching me. In grade 1, I struggled to write letters and numbers, so I doodled instead. My teacher told me I needed to write what was on the chalkboard, but I did not understand how. I was in grade 1 for 1 month as my mother was concerned about my learning in class and being recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. My mom decided it was best to take me out of class. My mom tried teaching me homeschooling, but I was unfortunately not taught much during that time as my mom struggled with mental health. I did not understand what my mom tried teaching me either. I did not understand numbers and letters. At age 8, social services decided to pull my brother and I out of the house due to personal challenges in the home. My brother and I were sent to a foster home. When we moved into the home, I was recently out of school for a couple of years. Because we were moved to the home at the end of the school year, they decided to keep me out of school until the fall. I remember looking back at a book and telling my foster parents that I wanted to learn to read. They struggled to make time for me as they had many kids in the home. So I decided to sound out letters and was able to read some words. I told the foster parents who helped tell me if I was reading the right words. I was proud to be able to read a bit, and it made me very happy. In the fall, I was sent to the new school. The school decided to put me in a grade 3 class to see how I would do. We did a math test to see what we knew previously, but I did not know how to do anything on the quiz. So I doodled. The teacher asked me if I knew the stuff on the test, and I said that I did not. The school then decided to put me in a grade 4 class instead because that class had another student who also had a disability. We got pulled out of class to do a lot of activities not related to school. In the mainstream class, I was starting to make a lot of friends. However, when I got sent to the other class and was pulled out, those friends noticed. and I started getting bullied. They did not understand why I was pulled out. I was in the mainstream class for about 10 minutes at the beginning of class every day. After meeting the educational assistant and the student who also had a disability, we did things around the school and went to the library. I remember doing very little education, but I did learn some sign language. I remember wanting to learn to read more, but we did not focus on reading, writing, or math. I wish I was given the chance to learn more. If I could go back and talk to that school or those teachers now, I would tell them that people can learn and do anything they put their mind to. I would tell them that some people learn differently, but they still learn the same things as everyone else, with or without a disability. It was not fair that I had to move classes just because there was another student. I should have received the help in the class I was in previously where I had friends. Being pulled out of class did not allow me to get to know other students. One student and I were pulled out of class and expected to interact, but we did not have anything in common. Not only was I not spending time with the class I was in, I lost my friends from my old class too. I used to get calls from friends daily, but when I was moved, I lost the friendships I had made. Even though I was moved into another mainstream class, it wasn't inclusion. It was still segregated as the educational assistant would just take the two of us out of class. My mom had health challenges, and we hadn't seen her in months at that time. She passed away while we were in the foster home. I only found out because the educational assistant told me there was a surprise at home. She wasn't trying to be mean about it, but I went home thinking something good was going to happen, but it wasn't good news. The foster parents shared with me that my mother had passed away. I was out of the school for at least 2 weeks and I came back upset with the educational assistant. I wasn't angry with her, but I was disappointed. I didn't tell her, but I felt that way, and it was hard. I was young and going through a lot all at once. My dad was able to take my brother and I to Alberta. When I went to my new school, I was in a grade 4 and 5 split class where children who were a couple of grades behind in learning. Although this class was still segregated, my teacher was willing to meet with me after school and during recess to help me read. By the end of grade 5, I could read chapter books. This teacher made a big difference in my academics as she was kind and passionate about learning. She wanted every student in her class to be successful. A great teacher can indeed make a difference. She saw something in me and was able to help me go from someone who could barely read to someone who could read chapter books at the grade 4 and 5 level. She celebrated my potential. Even though I continued to experience struggles, this was a game changer. I was even more determined to learn. Her belief in me allowed me to believe in myself. I was inspired to keep trying. This teacher also introduced me to other kids and helped me get involved in school events. I remember at parent-teacher interviews, she gave a lot of good tips for how I could succeed. She would encourage me to play with others at recess, even though I was shy. She noticed things about me. I had just moved and didn't know anyone, so this was a big help. She took the time to care for me as a whole person. After I graduated from elementary school, my family and I moved to Red Deer. I went to middle school and was placed into a more segregated class. There was less teaching in that class, and most of which were taught was in a modified book. and we went at our own pace. I remember hearing about other classes and asked my teacher if I could attend a more challenging class. Whenever I did this, I was told that it was not possible. The classroom was loud. I felt like I could not concentrate and learn easily. There were all kinds of kids, including the kids the school believed had behaviors that meant that they could not be in the regular class. I felt like if you were different, you were sent to this class. Kids in this class, including myself, were targeted for bullying, and we were often bullied before class, at lunchtime, and after class, as we would see the same kids in the hallway. Because of the bullying, my dad decided to put me in a Catholic school. I was then sent to a mainstream class. I was put in a class with everyone else, but I needed the support in place to be successful. I enjoyed English class, but I struggled more in math, science, and social studies. I remember the teacher trying to accommodate me to the best of her ability, and she found modified booklets for me to work on that were related to what we were learning. The teacher paired me up with a couple of classmates for support if I needed extra help. My GPA was low, according to the school, and within a month, the school transferred me to another middle school to be put in another segregated class. This program was more challenging than the others. I did not understand why I could not be accommodated fully in a mainstream class. During this time, I was dealing with a lot from grades 7 until 9, as I was mute and scared to speak during things happening in my personal life. It was difficult for me in class and outside of class. Because I was mute, I wasn't able to advocate for what I needed. I was shy and anxious. All of this made it challenging to make friends. This new class had a removable wall that separated the room into two adapted classes. The day I started, the teacher had pulled kids from each class to greet me as it was midway through the year when I joined. I was happy to be greeted by kids, but it was confusing. I was in a segregated class. I made one close friend in that room, but she and I barely talked, as she was on the other side of the room separated by a wall. She is still my friend to this day, but at that time, we only saw each other at lunch, before, and after school. She saw me sitting alone at lunch and approached me to join her and her friends. This was the start of a friendship that lasts until today. Even though I had friends in this class, some things were too easy and others were too challenging. They taught a curriculum for some subjects, but for spelling, it was a modified book that everyone was given. I remember being given a grade 1 spelling book, and because spelling was not a challenge for me, they kept going up by grades. Eventually, I needed a grade 10 spelling book in grade 7. Everyone has different strengths and things they struggle with. I asked if I was allowed to be in a mainstream English class at least, and they said no because this program was not intended to be like that. The next few years were all over the place. There were a lot of changes from the school system that left me confused and also impacted my relationships. After a year, the program I was in moved back to a school I had attended before. Kids were moved around different schools because the school system kept changing what they offered and where students had to go. It was really confusing for me. That program was more challenging, but it wasn't individualized. Everyone learned the same thing, and there was a teacher giving a lesson, but the students' learning needs were not addressed. Anyone who needed more support was moved out. I needed proper support. The teacher didn't address the learning needs of the kids in the class. Math was my most challenging subject, and I almost failed it throughout grade 8 and 9, but I kept studying so I would not fail. I did not have the individualized support I needed during that time. The one friend I met at the other school and I did not have each other's phone numbers, so we lost contact until high school. It was hard being away from my friends at a different school. In grade 9, I was moved into another home, and the foster parent happened to be one of the teachers in the program.
Okay, so Emily's going to continue to talk about high school. I just wanted to share a little bit about high school in Alberta, just as a background in case some of you either didn't grow up in the system or are unfamiliar for whatever reason. So in high school in Alberta is extremely streamed, what we call streaming. This means that based on your grades, you are put into a particular stream or program. And this is, in some rural schools or smaller schools, it's not as clear who's in what stream, but in most high schools in Alberta these days, you really know kind of where you're at. And Alberta Education provides a pathway chart for students to identify how to, get to graduation and the different routes that you can take through these streams. But it is difficult to move if you, at a young age of like end of grade 9, have been put into a lower stream. It can be quite challenging. If for whatever reason you had a low mark, it sort of sets you on that path right away. It's very difficult to move out of it. And the origins of streaming was an attempt to sort of meet the needs of the various different types of learners, but in practice, what's happened is that they're quite segregated from one another. And if you are in a particular stream, you may not potentially meet or even talk to anyone outside of that program. And then just some of you might be familiar with the DASH system. So Emily's going to talk a little bit about knowledge and employability, which is Dash 4. And then there's like the Dash 1, Dash 2, which is usually people who are going to go on to be competitive in post-secondary. And then there is Dash 3 in some cases, which is for students who are going into trades. The trouble with this is that if you want to be a competitive, if you want to register for a post-secondary, even in the trades, essentially, you really do need to be in those higher level academics that the certificate that they give you for being in the lower stream doesn't actually lead to being a competitive learner in the trades. And then each school district will also have their own version of segregated programs beyond these. So it's very streamed for even students who are competitive, but then even students who are on what we call the non-graded program, there'll be even greater ways in which the school system does this. So just some of you might not know, and you're going to go on, Emily, to talk about these things. And so just a little bit of a, overview.
A teacher can make a difference. In grade 10 in high school, I spent the day with the same kids for all of my classes in the Knowledge and Employability program. Many of the students in this class were kids who were a couple of grades behind or had behavior difficulties. Some students were not in the class because they struggle with academics, but they were put in because they struggled sitting still or had trouble with regulation. Being put in this class was a lot like the other segregated programs I was in. I found out that the foster home I was in was trying to move me into a new home so I could go to a school for people with disabilities. The new home was far from my family and friends, but was located close to the institution. My foster parents told me my IQ was too low, even though I was doing okay in school. In order to move me, they needed my consent. I said no. I did not want to go away from the school where I had classes and away from my friends and family. I would have known no one in that town and would have been isolated. At the time, I did not understand why, but a school designed for people with disabilities did not feel right. It made me angry that these schools still exist. I fought for my right to stay in the same school and not be segregated. In grade 10 in math class, I noticed a few students doing manuals that were mainstream level to see if they were ready to, to do mainstream next semester. I asked the teacher if I could do the manuals. He laughed at me and said no. I felt embarrassed and mad that he was so quick to say that I could not do something without even seeing if I could. He had no way of knowing what I could and could not do. I badly wanted to keep being challenged, and knowing I only had a couple of years left of high school, I was very determined to get that diploma. I advocated for myself again. I talked to my teacher and was lucky she was willing to help me. Your experience in school often depends on the teachers. One teacher was passionate about helping me get into mainstream after I told her that was what I wanted. I told her my dream was to get my high school diploma. She said she would do what she could to make that happen. My grades were not where they needed to be allowed in mainstream, but she asked the principal to see if they could make an exception. The principal said yes. Her support built up my confidence. I know she believed in me. Some students were able to get into mainstream, but not all. However, her goal was to help every student out of this program and into mainstream classes by the time they were in grade 12. Because of her, I could do mainstream classes in grade 11 and 12. My future. Being in segregated classes made getting to know others more challenging. In the mainstream, students meet each other as every class has all kinds of learners. When I was put in the mainstream, I did not have experience being in classes with other kids and barely knew them. I found it awkward as I was only familiar with the small group of kids I had previously known in the segregated program. I wish I could have been in mainstream classes with the appropriate supports starting in elementary, not only in high school. In this program, students were allowed to graduate with a certificate that could allow them to work in trades, but trades was not for me. When I was finally in mainstream, it gave me more of a chance to think about my future. I wanted to expand my career options from what I was previously given. I felt limited by the things that were shared with me about what I could do with my high school or what else came after high school. I had spent so much time in school in classes where there were limits or low expectations, and the teachers were not always able to help. In school, I had an educational assistant who would follow me to all my mainstream classes and support me as needed. They pulled me out a few they pulled out a few students for exams, but I was happy for the most part that I could stay in a mainstream class. I did struggle in the classes and I needed to be given individualized support. Growing up, before I was given the opportunity to be in mainstream, certain people in my life and teachers in the school would say I could not do this or I could not do that, making me doubt myself. I was told I would not go far in life. It affected my confidence, but I was still determined. It did take me a long time to change my mindset. I struggled with my mental health as I did fight for depression and anxiety. However, I was able to bounce back and change my thinking. What got me through was my determination. I knew I could learn if there was a different way to teach me. If I had a chance, I could do anything. Relationships at school matter, and I didn't have an opportunity to develop friendships where I was placed. When I was in mainstream, I started thinking more about my future. My dream was to work in social work since I was in foster care, but with my grades, I did not know if it was something I could achieve. My connection to other students were limited in both settings. The group was small in my segregated class, and we were only with each other. However, when I was finally introduced to more students in the class, I did not know them well. I was shy, so I did not go up and make friends easily. I could have met more people if I had been included in mainstream previously. When we were in the same school, but it also felt like we were not in the same school at the same time. I would have opportunities to get to know students in small moments. I took choir and option classes where I might have had a chance to meet a few people. In the segregated program, it was always the same people. I was always happy if I got to take an option class. Some of my friends in other classes did not have that option. I wish I met more people throughout the school experience. This seems wrong. Everyone should have a choice in what they want in life. I felt guilty that I got to take mainstream classes, and some of my friends did not. I would ask my friends why they were not given the chance. The programs were set up that way. But I felt like I should be grateful. I felt glad that I was at least close to mainstream, but it still did not feel enough for me. Now I know I had the right to be upset about these choices being made for me. I wanted to follow my dreams, but felt limited by being placed in these segregated programs. I was determined and I knew I could do more. I knew I could get my diploma. However, I would not let this keep me down. I did not understand why other students were stuck in the programs they were in. I did not see no as an obstacle. I knew I could still do what I wanted to achieve, which meant I needed to continue advocating for myself. A psychologist would come and do tests in high school yearly. They would test you to see if your disability has changed. I was always pulled out of class, and it was every year. I wanted to be there and learn. I ended up just missing another class. It was embarrassing to be pulled out and felt like everyone was looking at me. I missed important classes, and it made me feel more behind. It does not seem right because you are being pulled out. It seems unnecessary because as an adult, I'm not tested every year to see if my disability has changed. Testing is a proof you need support, but we weren't given that support in class. Looking back, I find it goes by your IQ. Is that necessary for schools? It should be about your learning. What support do you need from the school and in your life? Now, in my post-secondary, I see students with all kinds of learning needs, and my professors are open to providing different options for all kinds of students. In post-secondary, it is different. When you take a program of your choice, you can still take a practicum and get a job in a field of your choice. There are people here who learn differently, and that is commonly understood. K-9 schools in general do not do that. Teachers should consider how all kinds of learners can be included and get school support rather than being stuck in the lower streams. In those programs, you need support for your learning styles. These experiences have driven my passion for advocacy. If something I feel does not seem right, or something is going on that is not okay, I do not feel right sitting around and doing nothing about it. It is the same when it comes to inclusion. I feel like it is hard to watch these things happen and watch people continue to be segregated or treated wrongly. Everyone should be treated equally. No one should be treated differently. As someone who has been pulled out of classes in elementary school and has had to fight for the opportunity to learn, it takes a toll on your mental health and your self-esteem. Why am I being treated differently? You question why it is happening. Only some people know how to advocate. So if I do, one more person is fighting for difference. The high school program I was in could have helped more with giving career direction. The program had a work experience class geared towards helping you figure out your career by researching different careers. However, none of those seemed possible with the certificate you get in the end, and there needed to be better support to help figure out realistic career goals. People have different ambitions. In school, you think about what you will be when you grow up. When you're only given a small number of options, choosing based on your interests is challenging and seems like it could be attainable. Sorry, what did I get? Right there. I was given such limited options. I did not want to do those things. It limited what I could even try to do. My experience as a university student is so different. In inclusive post-secondary, you can explore many options. Being able to take anything you want in college or university is an option for all. People with disabilities have ambitions, goals for college or university, and a career or job plan just like people without disabilities. People have different likes and dislikes. I am taking social work. That is my passion. I always wanted to do that, but I could not see it as possible when I was younger. Everyone has passions, and not everyone wants to do trades or work in a specific, stereotypical role. The way the school has laid the streaming options is minimal if you're in a lower stream. You're not able to build your career around your passions. It is assumed that you will be in particular jobs, many of which are only fulfilling for some people. If you want to do something and you're passionate about it, you can do it. It should not have to come down to a good teacher who happens to listen. It should be their right to have that education. We need teachers who are willing to accept a student and keep them in the class. Many are still pulled out for various reasons, like not understanding their work, inability to stay still, etc. The children pulled out of classes often wonder why they're being pulled out and why they cannot learn in class like the others. Being pulled out of class takes them away from their friends. I wanted to be in the class even when I was struggling. Learning outside the class is more challenging because you're so focused on why you're being pulled away. I spent a lot of time not learning the curriculum with the necessary support, but instead was confused, moved around, and pulled out. I had to really fight for what I wanted. Life after high school. My English teacher was good, and I got good grades in class, but they still weren't good enough. So I had limited choices at Red Deer College. After my upgrading, I had the grades that allow me to get into the early learning and childcare program. My dream was always to work in social work with families, but I did not see it as possible because I did not have the grades I needed to make that happen. I was in Red Deer College trying to complete the 1 year early learning and childcare program in the span of 5 years. I kept struggling in my classes and understanding my assignments. I did not do well and often met with the teachers before each assignment was due, but they could only do so much. I also met with the disability supports at the college, but was only given a few accommodations. The only accommodations that helped me were extra exam time and being in a different room while doing my exams. I decided to take a break from college and return a few years later to complete my studies. When I went back, I had a different disability support coordinator, and I was not able to get a private room to do my exams anymore. I advocated and explained how I needed to be in a quiet room to help me stay focused. I told them I needed extra support to be successful in my class, but unfortunately, they couldn't provide that. During a break from the early learning and childcare program, I was offered a program in college for people with disabilities. I did not want to take that program at first because I wanted to keep trying and not be put in a program again just for people with disabilities. I felt pressured by the people around me, so I took it. The segregated post secondary program gave me an opportunity for work experience placements at a senior home. I sold coffee and chatted with the seniors. I was interested in doing more and being challenged. This placement went well, and so the senior home offered me a job to work in housekeeping. At first, I was excited, but I didn't know what I was getting into. They treated me differently, and it did not seem to trust that I could do the same things as everyone else. I had to check in after each task. My supervisor told me I could only do the work if I checked in. It was really hard for me. I started to believe that this would be my life now. Maybe employers were always going to treat me this way. Even though I ended up advocating for myself with this employer by speaking to someone about it, I knew this is not what I wanted. I did not want to be in housekeeping. I was glad I was at least given a paid opportunity, but I wanted more. So I decided to return to the early learning and childcare program at Red Deer College. I continued to experience challenges, including a practicum supervisor who didn't understand how to support me. She basically told me to drop out of the program instead of considering how I might be accommodated with my support needs. The experience I had in high school and now were not preparing me for what I really wanted to do or my passions. I then met my now husband, who told me about inclusive post secondary and how it changed his life. Now, taking my dream program, which is social work, I feel like I fit in. Everyone in my class learns differently, and I can participate like everyone else. I can put my hand up and work on the group projects. It makes me feel happy and gives me an understanding of my career path. Everyone has different passions. I feel proud of myself and I am more confident. In one of my classes, we did a social work interview exercise. I put my hand up and volunteered. I was nervous, but I went up, and everyone in the class gave feedback. I gained more confidence that day. I can use the classes and content I'm learning in my future jobs. Being able to do a practicum gives you hands-on learning related to your studies. I had several options for both semesters and placements I didn't know was possible. I had some ideas about what kind of practicums I wanted to do, and I was so happy to be able to choose the type of practicum I was interested in. I have learned so much, and I am now more clear about the importance of inclusion. Now I am thinking about creating my vision of a job. There are different paths for what I could have in the field. I want to help people in the foster care system and advocate for people with disabilities. I have career ambitions. I want to see I want to use what I learn in my future career. I see social work support from inclusive post-secondary as something other than a setback or a limitation. Being in this program has helped my advocacy skills, and by advocating for change, I can make a difference. My teachers who taught me in elementary school would be shocked. I once was so shy, but now I can advocate. To today's teachers, taking a child out of class or not allowing them to be in class too long does more damage than good. It prevents the child from making friends and learning the same things. Just because they look like they are not listening does not mean they are not. Every child has different learning needs, and if a child is set up in an environment that helps them learn, they can learn the same things as everyone else. There is lots of support out there to help teachers. There are ways to reach students' learning needs and preferences. Even though I was in high school over 10 years ago, I noticed that schools still segregate children, and not much has changed. When I see someone in a spot that is not inclusive, it makes me mad that it is still happening to this day. Kids are being pulled out because they learn differently, which does not seem right. To those kids, I want to say that you can do anything. You're not stuck in this situation and can learn the same things as others, just differently. My goals are unfolding now because I have advocated for my opportunities. And now I can keep moving forward. People with disabilities can have a normative pathway, learn the same things, and do the same things as everyone else. They can graduate, go to college or university, have a job or a career, get married, and have kids. Everything is possible. Yeah, so that's the end of it. Is there anyone who has any questions or comments?
So Tiffany, you posted a few comments throughout your presentation. Emily, I don't know if you want us to read any of them out loud or.
Yeah. Did I read them?
So there is a question, just 1 minute while we type it. Thanks for your feedback. We really would love to hear from you if you have any questions. It's touching and inspiring, Emily. Thank you for sharing your story. Lots of people are saying. This is a little different than Zoom, which is what I'm used to. So we can't actually see all your faces or your cameras on or off. So you'll have to let us know in the chat how things are going.
I just realized I'm a moderator here. I can just pop in and ask my question, and that might be a little bit faster.
Yeah.
but that's also for anyone else. If anyone else has a question that they would like to say orally, please just request it in the top right-hand corner of the presentation, and we can approve that, and then you can ask questions. Um, so my question was, I completely agree that we need to stop the process of segregation in classrooms. It's really harmful. Um, just saying that as someone who also had a disability, has a disability, sorry, and was pulled out very frequently, and how harmful that was for me. However, with the way classrooms are set up now, regardless if it's elementary or in high school, um, there isn't any accommodations for students, even in a integrated classroom. Um, what would you recommend? Like, what steps do you feel like schools need to? I know it's a big question, but like, what do you feel schools need to do, even just to start, to make sure that it's accessible for students in those classrooms when they're integrated?
Mm, I would say like there are all a lot more resources out there than teachers know. And so just looking at what kind of supports they can have to successfully, like to be able to help the students be successful in the class so that they don't have to be pulled out. That would be the number one that I can think of. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. There are a couple questions in chat that I can read out as well. Um, we have, do you have any advice for parents of children with learning needs?
Um, my number one advice would be keep advocating for your child. And if the school is saying that your child has to be pulled out of um, mainstream classes into a segregated class, um, uh, just say no. Like just say no. This is not happening, and keep advocating. That would be my number one um, advice.
Yeah, agreed. I think the biggest thing for disabled students is having someone that can advocate for us and go to bat for us when we can't,
Yeah,
or we just don't have the resources to. Um,
yeah. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say one more thing. Is that also don't advocate alone. So always have like 1, 2 extra people who can support you and who are on your side about your child being uh, staying in the mainstream class.
Sonia asks, I wonder why your consent is not required when you ask to leave class for an assessment.
Yeah, I've wondered the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know if things have changed in recent years,
Mm-hmm.
but when I was in elementary, I remember being pulled out basically at random,
Yeah.
and my parents not really being informed of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so sorry, Aqeela here. There's general consents for services. And so you would have had, like, parents have to sign those. As far as how that's done, there is no, that I have seen, kind of like appreciation for what the experience is for people being pulled out of class in that way, right? So the consent is just that the parent consents to an assessment. That's all, but not how it's done. Tiffany, you asked that question about what can be done in terms of like given the classes right now
Mhm.
and the amount of pullout. I wonder, would it be okay for me to give a bit of an answer there?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. You're one of our presenters.
Yeah, I just thought, I was thinking about it after you were talking, and I was thinking, one of the things that's really helpful is to make it a universal thing. So if it is going to be that students are being pulled in small groups, then everyone should be pulled in small groups for different things at different times. And if that's just how you do business in your classroom, then it's not stigmatizing. And so if it's even students who are the A++ competitive learners, sometimes going with the EA just for whatever purpose, and then sometimes it's others, and sometimes it's others, it's mixed ability groupings, then it's not stigmatizing. And that can be one thing that people can do.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I agree. We have another question from Nexi. Are there resources for newcomer students living with disabilities? Language is often a barrier.
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah.
So my experience is that there are usually good resources available depending on who it is. A lot of newcomer communities have their own organizations, which will sometimes have people at the ready to help with some of that liaise work, especially around language translation or interpretation. So that would be my starting point. But the other thing is to bring someone in your network, in your family, who perhaps is there to take notes, to be involved in a second listener, and maybe someone who has a greater command of the language than you do. So I would go first to, usually the newcomer communities have their own kind of, have made their own groups that help with this kind of thing. And then if not, then I would recommend the family go to their own network and see if there's someone who's willing to come along and provide that support.
Is there any other questions that anyone has?
Just a lot of people talking about consent and not honoring the idea of consent. Absolutely. More training for the education system regarding informed consent is needed. Absolutely. Parents aren't giving consent for assessment at the beginning of the school year. It's not enough, right? Yeah. And sometimes too, like the amount of pullout overall, I think parents and others don't realize how frequently it's happening. So you might think, you're just signing off for the one day, but it's sort of a slippery slope, and now people are being pulled out for a number of things. And then it's very disruptive, as you described really well. It's very disruptive to your whole day.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, sorry, Alexi brought up a great point. Just that parents sometimes don't even know what they're signing up for. It's not always super clear or explained. It's sort of like a paper handed at you or an online form sent to you, but you may not understand the impact of what you're signing. So that's just one thing for parents to be aware of, that what is it you're actually signing when you give consent for the specialists to come in. Yeah. Sorry. I'll just repeat. So another thing, the idea of, your point about just say no. So if someone is pressuring you to put your child or for you to be in a special education class, that you actually have the right to say no. Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. Like I said earlier too, is that just advocate and just say like, no, I'm not doing that. Like that's, you don't have to agree to the school just because they're encouraging it.
And you can ask the question, what is it about that setting that you will provide to my child, and how can you provide that in the mainstream or the regular class? Have them put the school to explain what the support will be in that setting, and then how they will bring that to the regular class. Because it's not the four walls that are making the difference, right? It's the services.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I think a big part of it is just learning both, parents, guardians, and the students with disabilities have the right to advocate for themselves. So often we don't feel like we have that right.
And it's a human right, right? It's inclusive education by way of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. It's a human right.